The irony of me sitting in a room with a blind pulled all the way down so it's slightly dark and coming on to talk about lighting is not lost on me today. I want to share some things that I've learned as an interior stylist hosting panel discussions all about lighting, and specifically lighting design, because as an interior stylist, I don't really need to know about lighting design. I'm not an interior designer. I'm not doing anything that Sparkies would need to come and channel out wires, channel out walls for wires. There's no plugs. I've done shoots for Wanstead Electrical for light switches. We used fake walls. It's all smoke and mirrors when you're an interior stylist. So when I was asked to host these panels, I learned so much, and that is what I'm going to be sharing with you today. There are 9 elements that I learned that I think are worth sharing. The first is that you should always consider natural light. Natural light coming into a room will really affect how it feels during the day and obviously how it feels during the evening. So, for example, in my home, I have big patio doors in my open plan kitchen diner, but the room is north facing, so it's a very cold light. But at night time, we've got no window treatments, so that whole space, you've got a whole wall of darkness along that wall where the patio doors are. So when I'm choosing lighting, I need to think about how I'm using the whole space. But if I'm going to need a little bit of extra light during the day, which we quite often do, especially if it's a gloomy day, we need to think about the north facing light and how much we need to kind of boost the room for that light. The second element is that we layer lights, or we should be layering lights. This is something I hadn't really thought of before. When you style a room, say you're doing a living room, you know that you want to have a side table with a lamp, and you know you probably want to throw in some cushions. Maybe you want a rug with a coffee table on. You're layering up the spaces. How you accessorize those spaces. It's all the layering, and it's the layering that makes a room feel inviting and warm and interesting. But when it comes to lighting, layering wasn't something I had ever thought of. I think you probably do it instinctively, but when a lighting designer comes in, they will literally think about how those layers are integrated in the space. So you want to have different lights for different aspects or different things that you're going to be doing. So a living room is a really good example. You might find you've got a corner of your living room is your home office. You've got a desk or a bureau or something where you work, so you're going to need some task lighting. So you might need the room to be quite bright. In the winter months when it's really dark by 5 o'clock, you might need extra lighting, maybe a desk lamp that can shine onto the surface. You might want to have the kids be able to run around in there and have play dates. So you want to, I always say kids, and people always get upset with me for saying kids. I don't assume everyone has kids. What I mean is maybe you want to sit and have a chat. Right, you've got your friend round for a coffee. You want to be able to see your friend. You put the overhead lights on. You might want to have drinks in there after you've had friends round for dinner. You would probably just want lights, side lights, table lamps on the sides of your sofa so that there's no light in your face, but it's creating a nice warm glow. This is how you layer lighting. Number 3 is colour temperature. So colour temperature isn't something I'd really thought of. I know that you can get different light bulbs with different some might be bright white, some might be quite warm yellows. You can get daylight light bulbs now, but I hadn't really thought of colour temperature as an actual measurement. So Simon explained this he explained it in one of the panel discussions that I actually shared on another podcast, which I will link through to in the show notes here. But he goes into the colour temperature in quite a bit of detail there. I'm not even going to attempt to explain it to you because it is quite techie, but it was very interesting how the different colour temperatures can affect how a room feels. I can give you a quick lowdown though. So colour temperature by scale of range. Now I'm going to read this so I don't get it all wrong. So it ranges from warm to cool. So you've got a warm light, which is about 27,000 kelvins to 3,000 kelvins. And that's for your cozy feelings, your nice, warm, relaxed. You want to sit and have a glass of champagne or something after your dinner. You want that nice, warm feel. The next one is your neutral white. That's 3,500 to 4,000 kelvins. And that's between a warm and a cool light. It's a neutral white light that gives a balanced and natural appearance. You can tell I'm reading, can't you? It's really good for spaces where you need to be able to see what you're doing. So in the kitchen when you're doing prep, in your office, anywhere you need to have a lot of functionality and be able to see what you're doing. And a cool light is 5,000 to 6,500 kelvins. And cool light is very crisp, very bright. It's very close to daylight. It's very good for when you want to have lots of attention to detail. You need to see what you're doing. You might want that in bathrooms, especially if you want to be able to put makeup on first thing in the morning in the winter when it's pitch black outside, or you're going out for dinner and you want to be able to see what you're doing. You need to have a good light, and that's where you would use your cool light. Number 4 was fixture placement. So when this was what Rukmini was sharing, and she was talking about how if you know where everything's going to go. So for example, you might find you have a living room that's large enough that your sofa is away from the wall, but you want table lamps next to your sofa. So you haven't got a wall to plug lights into. So you need to make sure you've got wiring in the ground with those little flap up light plugs or plug sockets, so you can plug lights in and they can be hidden underneath the sofa so you don't have loads of wires. Obviously on photo shoots as an interior stylist, when I'm faking it, we hide wires. They get stuck underneath the table so you can't see them. We don't really want to see them ever, which is ridiculous. Wires and TVs and toilets and things very rarely seen in shots. But when you're designing a space that someone's going to be living in, you need to make sure that that is an actual easy to achieve look. So by having the wires and the plugs put in at the kind of sparky stage, so before any flooring goes down, you need to make sure the wires are put into place for where you know your sofas are going to go. That's a really important thing to think about. I also remember Simon talking about a lot of people who get him in to do lots of lighting design. They will have amazing pieces of art and they will want to put those artworks on the wall and have a light shining on those. And you need to have the right kind of light. You need to have the right positioning. And again, you need to make sure that you are making sure the wires are in the right place for it and not doing it retrospectively, because you don't want to be channeling out brand new painted walls. Another thing that's come up quite a few times, and at the end of our panel discussions we would open the floor up to the audience, and quite a few times we've had questions that have Simon has shared about problems people have when they want to have an island in the middle of their kitchen and then they have a roof lantern over the top because they want lots of lovely daylight coming in on the roof through the roof lantern onto the kitchen island. But what happens is they then want their light to hang over their kitchen island and there's nowhere to put the fixture, and some lights are very heavy. You might have something that's all glass. You can't just kind of string it up and wrap a wire around a pole sort of thing. You need to think about where the light is going to be hung before you position your island underneath it. Or maybe you can't have the specific pendant light you want where you want it, because you can't have you don't have the structure involved to hang it from. I hope that makes sense. So basically think about where you're positioning your roof lantern, your island, if you want to have reasonably heavy lanterns hanging down. Roof lanterns and light lanterns, all mixed up in one. So think about that when you're positioning light. I mean, you don't have to have a roof lantern over the kitchen island. You might be able to position it so you can have both, or maybe you choose a different light that enhances the space. You just have to kind of think about that really, really thoroughly. And it's really good to do that at the very beginning of a project or a renovation. Okay, number 5, and I can't believe it's taken us this long to talk about light bulbs. Light bulbs have changed. In 2016, let me just check, I'm sure it was 2016. Yes, 2016, there was the EU directive called EC 244-2009, and it was a timetable of phasing out incandescent light bulbs. So incandescent light bulbs are those old light bulbs, that the bayonet type, that were predominantly, they were recyclable, but they got very hot, they used a lot of energy, they weren't massively eco-friendly, but you could recycle them. We have now phased those out. It's actually quite difficult to find one of those old ones now. We now have the more compact fluorescent lights, CFLs, and these are the lights that you would use to replace those old light bulbs. So they're your eco light bulbs. We in our house we just call them eco light bulbs, and they can be quite difficult to light a space. They're the ones that they take a second to come on. You need to warm up, then you can get a bit of brightness. They have come quite a long way from when they first came in. But the thing about them is that they do contain mercury. and you can't just chuck them in your recycle bins. You do have to think about how you are going to recycle all of the lights now. Any LED lights, anything from those incandescent lights are not as easily or not as readily recyclable. So you pretty much can't put them in your regular recycling. They need to be recycled at a like a waste refuge at your local tip. There will be a separate bin. Ours has got a big wheelie bin, and you just chuck them in there, and then they get sent off and they get processed, I think the word would be. So just be aware of that. And I think that was really interesting. I think there were a lot of conversations about light bulbs and eco-friendliness, and that if you buy a really good quality light bulb, you will get what you're paying for. And if you buy a cheap light bulb, it's not going to be good for the environment. It's not going to be good for your household. It's going to cost a lot more money in the long run. So I would definitely recommend going and listening to the recording of the panel discussion that's linked below, so that you can understand what I'm talking about if you want to know a little bit more. I will do it no justice because I am not techie at all with those light bulbs things. This is almost like the snippet of what I've learned over the panel discussions that I have been on. I'll just run through a couple other light bulbs. So you've got the CFLs, then you've got halogens. So they're smaller, incandescent, they are more energy efficient. They can produce a really bright white light. You'll quite often find them in spotlights and floodlights. Then you've got LED bulbs. Now, LED bulbs are great because they don't get hot. Side note, I once set fire, I don't know if I shared this in any of the panel discussions, I'm sure I did. I once set fire to my bed when I was about, I must have been about 11 or 12. It was mortifying. I was having my bedroom decorated, and I was sleeping on my mattress on the floor in my brother's bedroom, and I had one of those desk lights that I just put next to my bed. Now, I'm still scared of the dark now, but I was very scared of the dark then, and I wasn't in my bedroom, so I left the light on. But during the night, I knocked it. And back then, I'm in my 50s now, so it's a little while ago, the mattress that I was on was like a rubber foam. It's almost like a memory foam from the 60s and 70s. Anyway, it didn't catch fire, but it caught and it burned. And I touched it in my sleep and knew I'd hurt myself. And I got up to go to the loo. And when I came back to go to the bedroom, I went to open the door and there was thick black smoke. Now, my brother was staying at my grandma's house, because we used to take it in turns to stay at grandma's house for the night. And I went and got my mum and I said, Mum, my bed's burning. So I was wearing a vest and nothing else in bed. I don't know why I would do that in my brother's room at 11 or 12 years old. But I wrapped a towel around me. I got my mum and I said, there's something wrong, my bed's burning. And she said, okay. And then she went to try and get my brother out. And I was like, no, he's not here. We all got out the house. The fire brigade were called. They picked up the mattress, folded it in half and shoved it out the window. And then the whole top of the house was full of smoke. It literally burned like a little, almost like someone had taken a bite out the corner of the mattress. It took a big chunk out of that, and basically it was burning, and we had to sleep in our next door neighbour's flat next door, all 6 of us on the floor, wrapped up in blankets and stuff until the next day. Now, the reason it was mortifying was because I had to go and stand on the pavement in a vest with a towel wrapped around me. It was awful. I was becoming a teenager. It was so mortifying. I'm still scared of the dark and have never slept with no clothes on ever since. I'm always ready to leave the house at any moment. Anyway, I digress. Probably oversharing a little here. LED bulbs, that's what we're talking about. And then halogen bulbs. Going back to the topic, Emma, back to the topic. Halogen, energy saving. These are designed to be more energy efficient, and they're traditional halogens. So they're typically longer lifespan because they use less energy. And then lastly, there's fluorescent tubes. So that my granny used to have those in her kitchen. They're very, very, it's very unusual to find them in your house. You might have them in your garage, but they're usually in commercial settings, commercial kitchens, maybe offices. They're quite harsh, but they are quite energy efficient now as well. Whew, it's getting very hot in here. Okay, I've touched on this a little. I've written a whole blog post about all these findings, and I've talked about being sustainable. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I have spoken about it already, in that you have to be very careful with how you recycle light bulbs, and the choosing of what you buy is imperative to how you recycle them. So I'm just going to touch on number 6 very lightly. I'll tell you what I will talk about though, is that something I didn't realise, or had never really entered my mind, was that you can buy lights or light fittings for your home that are, the light fitting has the bulb integrated. So when the light bulb dies, you have to replace the whole fixture. You have to get an electrician around to change the whole spotlight. You can't just change the bulb. And that's something I wasn't really aware of. I mean, I think I've bought some bulbs for my daughters from a very well-known Swedish brand. They were like little animal shapes, and once they died, they died. But they were plug-in rechargeable ones, but that was all integrated. But we're talking here about when you have a light fitting, a spotlight recessed into your bathroom or your kitchen, and you have to replace the whole thing. So be very mindful of that, because that's very wasteful. That you would, it might last 6 or 7 years, but still you can have a light fitting last 20 years and only replace the light bulb. So do be aware of that. The other thing, now I think I touched on this very briefly, but Fritz Fryer have this amazing service. So when Simon and Karen, who are the co-owners of Fritz Fryer, took over, Fritz was very well known for taking in beautiful old pieces of lighting and completely restoring them, and that's something they've done the whole time they've been there. So you might find a beautiful chandelier with cut crystal droplets. You could send that to Fritz. They could replace any pieces that were missing. If they couldn't find them, they can make them. They will rewire them. They will do all the testing. They can adapt them for modern day bulbs. So buying secondhand, and especially when they're beautiful because they are made so incredibly well, it's an option. So you don't even have to buy new. You can always buy vintage or antique and then have them reconditioned, rebuilt, re-beautified and repolished. There is a video actually of Fritz. I always come back to this. There's a video of a massive chandelier that was delivered to them. It came in boxes, and I think it was something like 27 boxes, and they've got it on YouTube. I will share a link to it. They basically, there's a lady called Margaret, and she is at the Fritz warehouse or studio, and her and another guy took everything out. They had to lay it all out. There was no instructions, because obviously if something comes together in one piece, you can then see how you take it apart. This came in pieces, in boxes, all wrapped up. So they had to take everything out and then rebuild it, and it's just stunning, absolutely massive. I definitely recommend going and checking that out. It's very interesting. Number 7, I found out why lights flicker. So I had a flickering light in my living room for years. I would turn it on. It had a dimmer switch. I would turn it on and it would just go. So I had to turn it up full. So I could never have just a nice, calm, relaxing, cozy setting, because it had to be on or off. Because if it was anywhere in between on the dial, it would just flicker. I didn't realise that what this is that it's a very old switch, very old. I think when we moved in, we changed to a dimmer switch, and we've been in this house maybe 16 years. But when you use like an eco-friendly, energy-efficient light bulb with those old switches, there's a mismatch and the current's not quite right and something wasn't working with it. I learnt this on this panel discussion, and it just so happened that I did a photo shoot with Wandsworth Electrical for light switches. And they very kindly gifted me some. We did a whole shoot with their light switches that you either added a wallpaper or you painted them. You can integrate these, and they're real designer led. They're absolutely top quality. So where there was a painted one, they couldn't put them back into the system. So she said I could have them. So I painted it the same colour as my living room. I got my husband to fix it. He's trained, don't worry. And no more flickering. We can dim the lights now. So I didn't understand that was a thing. So if you've got a flickering light dimmer switch, it might be that the switch is too old and you need to upgrade it. Yeah, links and image on Inside Stylists if you want to see a beautiful shot of their, a beautiful styled shot, I should say, of their light switches that I did. I loved that shoot. We created fake walls. It was so much fun. Okay, number 8, lighting controls. So, the blog post goes into this in quite a lot of detail, but what I really want to share is that there are so many different lighting controls. So you've got dimmers and switches, you can have lighting control panels, You can have remote controls, there are sensors, and you can integrate with like home solutions like Alexa or Google, Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant, whatever. And then I know Apple's got one as well. So you can literally say, Alexa, put the lights on. So you can do all these different things. But what has come up in these panels time and time again is that there's very big systems like Lutron Systems is probably the best known brand name for when you have a control system that your lighting is all kind of automated and on timers, and it's all done with dials and all electronics, and it's like a great big panel, and it's quite complex. And what I found the designers and architects have come back saying is that, do we really need that sort of complexity for our lighting? Because the expense of putting it in, the expense of running it, the expense of or the hassle of understanding how it all works. One of the guests said that what happens is you spend all this money on this really flashy system that can control the lights in your whole house, and you can literally go on your phone and you can turn the lights on and dim them down and do it all from your phone. But when your mother-in-law comes round to babysit, she can't even work out how to turn the lights on. And actually, you don't need that. You need a button or a switch to just go. You don't have to have this kind of whole complex system. And this was the feedback that the designers were getting, is that actually a good quality light switch is so much easier than a whole control panel that does your whole house's light switch. And do you really need to be able to fix your lighting from your phone? I think not. I went to a press launch recently and they were showing me that you could control your electric toothbrush from your phone. And I thought, my God, the world's gone mad. Seriously, toothbrush? And what they were saying was it will monitor where you're missing, areas you're missing. But seriously, the dentist can do that. Anyway, so yeah, it's almost like it's like a Rolex watch. It's almost a status symbol. I've got a Lutron system. It's like, yeah, but do you really need it? It literally has put me off. Not that I would ever need one in my little end of terrace. Okay, that was number 8. Number 9, outdoor illumination. So when I was talking at the beginning about how you can have a great big patio door in your space, it's great when the light is shining in and you've got all this amazing kind of light coming into your room. It makes your home feel really, really lovely. But at night time, that big patio door will just become a great big black square that is dark and ominous. And the way to overcome this is to put lighting outside. And I think it was Rukmini Patel again who was sharing that by putting lighting outside, you don't have to add anything to your indoor space. It's enough of a glow that it doesn't feel like the back of beyond in your garden. We have a garage at the end of our house because we've got 1930s end of terrace. You quite often will have alleyways down the back, and we've got a garage at the bottom of our garden, and it's got, you know, a fridge and a freezer and all the Dr. Peppers you could possibly need. And you have to walk down, oh God, I'm really oversharing now. You have to walk down to the end of the garden to get, you know, a bottle of fizzy water or champagne, Dr. Pepper, a pint of milk, some frozen sausages. And if you have to do that in the dark, I really don't like it. I get very scared. And this is the most ridiculous thing, and I know it's the most ridiculous thing, but I'm petrified because down the side of our garage, we've got a little area behind our garage as well, and it's really dark down there. And my kids think it's funny because I say, well, there's wolves down there. I know there's no wolves down there, but I get so scared I would run down, get what I needed, but it's the coming back. You're like, what's behind me? What's behind me? And I would literally go, because I was so freaked out. I'm sure people are scared of spiders and heights and all other things. For me, it's the darkness. So I think it was about a year before lockdown, my husband said, let's get some lights in the garden so you don't have to be scared anymore. So we bought 2 sets of festoon lights that could be kind of attached together, and we strung them up from the back door all the way down the garden. Now, our garden isn't massive, it's quite small, but those festoon lights are fabulous. They're like the Blackpool illumination. So now I can go, and they're on a timer switch from the garage. So they go off at about 10:30. So the whole of the neighbourhood can see in their gardens because of our Blackpool illuminations. But it's made a real difference because it means that the garden is lit and you can see the planting and you can see the furniture, and it really does create that outdoor room, and I absolutely love it. And that was one of the suggestions on the panel. I'm sure it was Rukmini who was sharing that. I had so many guests on the show. I've linked everyone up in the blog post over on Inside Stylists that you can go and check them out. They were so interesting. I have shared a recording with one of the interior designers who will probably be sharing it as some content at some point, in which case I will share that when that happens. But for now, these are the top things I've taken away from the panel, and you can go onto the InsideStylists.com website and find links to anything I've spoken about. I've got lots of imagery on there to talk about some of the lighting links, and in the show notes below as well, you'll be able to get all the links to all the YouTube channels and things that I've talked about too. So I hope that was interesting. I hope that was, I didn't really mean to share quite so many personal stories, but you know me, can't stop talking. Anyway, I've really loved doing the hosting of panel discussions. I find them fascinating, really interesting to see it from someone else's point of view, because obviously we don't have to be real. Like I said, we hide the wires, we string things up on poles. So some of these things never even entered my mind, and I do feel better equipped now when it comes to doing anything in my home, or if I ever get asked to do something in someone else's home, I will have a really good idea of what to do. Anyway, that's all for today. If you have any questions, do ask them below in the comments, and I will catch you soon.